I'm gonna pivot off of that. Something that I was thinking about after the film finished was, how do you move on from that? So I think one of my questions for you is, how has this journey affected your life? I know obviously you're now looking to for an Oscar nomination, but how has it influenced your relationship with the land? How has it shifted your perspective, your appreciation of the small things like hot showers?
Right? Well, everything that we do in life changes us. Every new friend you meet can change you because they introduce you to new literature or new music or new food. I mean, literally everything does change us. So for sure, 6 years on the Trans-Canada Trail changed me. I was definitely feeling the overwhelm of needing to reset, really, just like between the news and just my personal life and everything about, I was just really needing to check out to check in, as I say. And I needed a new film. So, I mean, it clicked off all the boxes for me to go. And it didn't take long for that armor, I guess is what I call it. When we're hurt, we armor up, and so it didn't take long for that armor to start falling off, when I started the journey, and it hasn't come back on yet. So I guess in the first spot, I mean, just trusting again and opening up my heart again. And that just came from the hundreds, and I mean, maybe even 1,000. I don't know how many people I met in those 6 years that offered me. It might have just been a momentary exchange of like, hey, you want an orange? Or hey, we have some extra water. How's your water situation? And then buzzed off on their ATV again or something. But it came in so many different ways and shapes and forms, but it was just hard for it not to land and obviously to change me and to realize that, wow, we really do live in a place that's not the story of the world we see in the news. As a journalist, I know that if it bleeds, it leads. That was the first thing I learned on day one in journalism school. It's a business. They need to sell newspapers, and it's just been proven that when they put something like that on the front page, it sells more newspapers. And I do think people need to be aware of what's going on in the world. I'm not like, trying to say that we don't, but it's just finding that balance. And so for me, anyway, those years of pulling away from reading the news because it wasn't important. All that mattered to me out there was the weather. That was the most important knowledge I needed at any given day of time. But also, like I said, and then of course, I guess the most profound changes came through my time in Indigenous communities in Canada. I knew that there was going to be a reconciliation journey for me as a person of settler descent on this land. And at the time I left, we had a different government, and I don't want to make anything political about this at all, but enough to say that the former government didn't give the priority that I felt the murdered and missing woman required in this country. There was just some issues that were really important to me that weren't seen to be falling on national importance, which of course has changed. It changed within 6 months of me being on the trail. All of a sudden we had an inquiry for the murdered and missing women. And, there's been like a renaissance that I witnessed in those 6 years happening in Indigenous communities across this land, going back to their languages, going back to their dances, their culture. It's pretty amazing. And to see the self-esteem that it's giving youth in some of those communities was extremely inspiring. But beyond that, beyond the intent, and of course, I go and I ask Vern, the Haida elder, how I might do that, and I carry the feather, and of course, unknown to me, that's going to shape my entire journey, just because I carry this thing with so much reverence, and what we carry in our heart shapes our lives, right? But at that time, I spent just listening and learning. You know, I had that, those are the things that shifted me. And first they came into my mind, you learn things like, well, the old way isn't the fact that you're canoeing and kayaking and not using, the fact that you're using all human power is not really the old way for the Mi'kmaq people, right? The Mi'kmaq people are like, it's for us. It's what you carry in your heart as you travel. That's the old way. These are huge shifts in perception, and once told and learned, irreversible, frankly. That's how I then looked at my journey, you know. And I always listened to everything everyone told me because of the long relationship and the sacred relationship they have with the land. There was a filmmaker named Velcro Ripper. He's still alive. He lives in Gibson's now, but he made this film quite a few years ago called Scared Sacred. And I kind of use those terms sometimes when I was out there, that because I had to deal with managing fear a lot, the way I did that was through some of the lessons I learned in these communities. So from the Mi'kmaq, right from the very beginning, like 3-4 months into the journey, that, you know, the idea of that what was the old way was to walk by saying that the earth is sacred, the earth is sacred, and by paddling on the water and saying the water is sacred, the water is sacred. That changed my relationship to being on something, to becoming, over the years, I'm not saying it happened like that, over the years, to being with something. And again, that is like a perception, a change in perception that once made is not altered. Like I still walk, I live, you know, rainforest right behind me that I walk every day when I'm home with my dog and my partner. And, you know, I say those, I still whisper those words to the land when I'm walking it. And I still whisper those words to the water when I'm paddling on it. And it's changed my relationship to the natural environment. I do, you know, it really gives me a sense of connection with some humility that I am a small part of a very large web of life. I'm not to say that I didn't know those things intellectually. You know, I've always been drawn. I've always loved the outdoors. I've always loved nature ever since I was a little child. You know, my first teachers were like tadpoles and frogs and, you know, salamanders. And I've always had a strong relationship with the earth. But a lot of, especially as I got older, a lot of it became more mind-centered, you know, too much education sometimes, you know, you're just in your head all the time. What really happened was, as my heart opened up from the healing of kindness of people, but also in terms of receiving some of these lessons, really changed, really profoundly changed me. Very long-winded answer to your question, but
No, that's beautiful. Thank you. I mean, you've already spoken a little bit to this already, but you know, we're Outdoor Play Canada, so our vision is obviously very focused on outdoor play, which Mark has talked a little bit about, that we don't see as being exclusive to just children. Did you see your journey as play, as outdoor play as an adult, or maybe at least any
absolutely.
parts of it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when we find our purpose in life and the ideal model, it's to blend all the things that you love with helping others somehow in your way, you know? So for me as a storyteller, what I love so much about documentary filmmaking is I would do these journeys regardless of whether or not I was a storyteller. I might not have been as committed to finishing that last one if I wasn't there to make a film on some days, but you know, I love the outdoors. I love walking. I love hiking. I love canoeing. I love kayaking. I love mountain bike riding. So, I mean, all of the things that I was doing, I love. I find joy in them. You know, not only are they healthy things to do, but it's just, that's the part of this world that I love the most, right? Is the natural world for sure. So, blending the things that I love into a profession has been my coup d'etat, really. Like for many decades, my parents were like, will you please just go get a trade? Will you please just get something that's just, we know when we die that you can survive, because we're, you know, being an artist is not unlike climbing Everest without oxygen for most days, you know. It's a pretty difficult path to take in our culture. Not all cultures are like that. That was something else that really surprised me about many of the different Indigenous communities I went through, was the respect for art and artists, people who are following their heart in their process. Like, I think if I'd shown up with a big film crew or something, that might not have landed in the same way. But being a person, more or less, like, you know, I mean, I had no money when I left. I had my equipment, I had my tent, I make some revenue from my other film projects, which, and giving up all my bills for those years, letting go of my home, selling my car, no hydro, no, all of that stuff. I was able to just sustain myself. I mean, all I really needed out there was food. And I needed to pay for my GPS once a month. And I needed eventually, when I started Lake Superior, a satellite phone. So yeah, it was just getting back to your question. Yeah, I mean, absolutely outdoor play. And also the fact that I just turned 50 when I embarked on this journey, I think is really important. Just you don't have to be an extreme athlete to go and enjoy these kinds of journeys. What you need to know is what's your limit? What's your capacity? There's that lovely story of that woman, and I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, but that grandmother that for 10 years or more has like walked the Appalachian Trail, and she knows I can do 10K. And then I'm setting up my tent, it's knowing what you can do. And there are days on the Voyager Trail when I'm snowshoeing and pulling a sled and I'm laughing my head off because I'm going 3K a day, but that's okay. I mean, one of the great gifts, I guess, too, of being older is that, how fast and how hard you do something just becomes irrelevant. It really does. It's not that meaningful. So just finding what your capacity is, and then maybe through experience, your capacity will expand. But there's lots of like real extreme athletes who have like laughed with me after a screening, went, you were holding your paddle upside down at one point. I'm like, yeah. Or that kayak paddle was a little short for that canoe. You're not getting a lot of your blade in the water there. And I'm like, granted, there's certainly a lot of people that could do this with a lot more style than I had, but I wasn't worried about that. I was more worried about the substance of what was happening in my heart than I was, oh, am I looking like an Olympic athlete out here? And the fact is, I paddled 8,000 kilometers with upside down paddles and half blades in the water, and I never tipped into the water, not once in those 8,000 kilometers. And I had, 6-foot swells on the Salish Sea and some rapids on my way up to the Arctic. And I, navigated some pretty dangerous water, but I also had an immense respect for the water. And I think one of the great things about being older too is I didn't try to say, let's go do Lake Superior and I'm going to do it in 3 weeks. I didn't have a watch and I didn't have a deadline. And I think that's also why I was able to navigate this experience safely, because I always could respect nature. I never woke up one morning and went, oh, there's a 6-foot swell, but I have to go because I have to be somewhere. That never existed for me. It would be like, well, you're going to just stay at your tent today, make some bannock, write in your journal, do some filming. And because I was out there as an artist, I loved those days. Bad weather days were like, yay, I get to stay in my tent and hang out at camp and sew a button and like have fun day, and I realize not everybody has that luxury, but I do encourage people when they do go out into nature, like, yeah, just to not put that expectation, like that's where the danger comes from. That's when you do something because you have a sense that you need to be somewhere when maybe you don't, or maybe you need to change where you need to be because that's how people get in danger out there. But when you respect nature, you can still get caught offhand, but most times not. But so, yeah, I mean, again, getting back to your question about like the outdoors and playing in the outdoors, it's all play for me. It's totally, people are like, oh, you must have wanted to quit. I never wanted to quit. The hardest part was coming home because I knew now that I didn't get to be outdoors every day. That was the best part of those 6 years was I was outdoors every day almost, right? And that's where I love to be. So it was the greatest gift I could have given myself, really, to do this journey.
It's beautiful. My follow-up question was, do you have any advice for adults seeking outdoor play adventures? I think you've already, shared.
I think I got that one.
I think you got that.
Yeah, find your limit and play within it, and don't compare yourself to other people. It's just it's your relationship to yourself, and there's no failure. You can go on a trail and do 5K a day and set up your tent. I mean, it's what's available to you, and just actually there's great gifts in doing it that way. You're more in the moment, you're more present, you're connecting to the environment you're with instead of looking at your watch and looking at your quantifying your journey in that way. So it's one of the gifts of getting older is you stop thinking that way. But yeah, absolutely. Just wanted to inspire people of all ages. Of all ages, I just saw a picture of a woman who's 89 cruising, she was in some kind of seniors athletic tournament or something, and she's like doing doing a long jump or something. She's like totally in the air. She's all muscled out. She's 89 years old, man. And she's just, yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is that there aren't, age isn't a limit, it doesn't have to be. And that health is wealth. As long as you have your health, you have those opportunities to get out there and do those kinds of things, right?
Yeah. Diane, I know we're only scheduled until 2:30, so in respect of your time, maybe a quick what's next for you?
Well, and I always say to people, I never kiss and tell. I don't actually start talking about my next film till I'm actually in production doing it. The reason for that is there could be it's right now, my focus is this film and the goals that we want to get this film out to the world. I shot 800 hours out there. And I would like to make I'd like to do an 8-part series on this journey if I can find some interest in that. So those are my folk, and I have started writing a book about the journey as well. So I think creatively, that's kind of what's before me right now for the next probably year and a bit. But I do have another long journey that I want to go out and do. So there is something else, coming down the line. But yeah, I'm just going to wait till I actually start it because there are a lot of companies that don't have ideas, but they have resources. And then there's people like me who have lots of idea and not as many resources. So I've just learned over the years just to keep it inside my heart until I actually start.
Well, that's okay. And
Sorry, just a short question. It came up at the board meeting, for those of us that saw the film, that you did destroy a few tents. The question
Yeah.
is, how many tents did you go through in the journey? It doesn't show up exactly.
Yeah, I know, eh? Well, I lost 5 in those first few months, as you know, but after that, I only went through 3 more over the next 5.5 years, and one of them actually really only 2, because one was just getting a better winter tent, so I started switching tents between seasons, so. But after that, it got a lot better. I think the next one I replaced wasn't until Slave River up in the Arctic. I went through Fort Smith, and there was some windows in an MEC tent I had that were losing some of the glue. They weren't sticking, and I thought, wow, I'm going up over the Arctic Circle now. I can't take any chances, so I replaced that one. But yeah, the worst was the beginning, and part of it was intentional. Like when you have 800 hours, you get to really pick and choose what you're going to show. And what I really wanted to show people was that I'm not one of those people that normally go and do these journeys. And I wanted to make it really accessible if you could see me out there doing it and failing camping school, it opens the door to other people going, well, maybe, you don't have to be, sponsored by Red Bull to go out there, like you can go out and access these trails like she did it, that means I could probably do it. That was pretty intentional setup, right? I mean, and also willing to laugh at myself and willing to admit that, my 50-year-old body still holds a 5-year-old's enthusiasm for life. So there's a little reality check that has to happen out there. But again, and something else I'm proud about the film, a lot of journeys into the wild and into nature, they say, well, I'm going to achieve X, Y, Z. And somehow if you don't achieve that, you failed. Or if you ask for help, you failed. And again, as a woman in my 50s embarking on this, I thought that's a sensibility I can shift in this story and just bring that one also to the table, which is it's good to ask for help. And it's also okay to modify and adapt your journey as you go along, to make it attainable. I mean, so yeah, those are, and also a thing I'm really proud of is that we never talk about politics in this film. I intentionally, of course, I have so many more people on camera than the people that are represented in this film, but I chose the people I did because I wanted everybody to feel Like it just doesn't, nobody in 6 years said, are you liberal, conservative, or NDP or Green Party? You know, it was all just, it wasn't about what made us different out there. It was what we shared. And the fact that we all found ourselves in the same place on the same trail at the same time, that was enough to share. And whether, you know, there's a lot of attitude in the outdoor community about ATVs and side-by-side cars. I even had some of that attitude going into it. But, you know, we actually all need each other because a lot of our trails are really kept open by snowmobilers, by these ATVers. And there's places I don't want to see an ATV on a single track trail going through Fundy Park. Don't get me wrong. But I think there is a place for everybody, and we're going to need everybody. And it is play. Not everybody has the physical capacity to get out on a trail in Newfoundland, you know, in the way that I did. But on their side-by-side car, they can get out there. They go fishing for trout in a little pond. They can bring their kids and a lunch, and they're out in nature, you know. So I learned how to shift my attitude about that a little bit too, you know, while I was out there. And I was helped by a lot of people like that on those side-by-sides too. So yeah, my heart definitely shifted about, yeah, it's the fact, the most important thing is that we're out there and we're enjoying it, you know, and accessing it in however we can. And, you know, if you don't teach a kid, if a child grows up believing that a tree is just timber frame to build a house, the survival of our species is not looking good. But you take kids out into the woods and you teach them that these trees turn carbon dioxide into oxygen. They have medicine, they have shade, they also have wisdom, you know. I mean, some of the greatest lessons I learned out there were just from those trees. So yeah, I think it's really important too, beyond that, as adults, our role in making sure we get kids out into these physical environments. And I mean, nature is going home, right? And getting people, getting kids out into these physical, I did Outward Bound as a kid, and I wish some milder version of that, or as a teenager anyway. And that program is what gave me the confidence to be able to go into nature. And I'd like to see more outdoor education in our education system, you know, because I really do feel like our survival as a species depends on it.
Yeah. I think that's maybe a beautiful last comment. I'm Diane, I'm so looking forward to, first of all, probably rewatching the film because I didn't get to watch it with my partner, but then seeing that next series, because it was noted that there were a lot of places you traveled through that weren't featured in the film. So
I know, and it's horrible. I've got some emails from people like, I'm very disappointed that Manitoba is not more in there. And I'm like, so am I. We had 800 hours and 2 hours to get people across, you know, one of the second largest country in the world, I think. So yeah, it was, that's why I want a series. And then every province and territory could have their time and their representation, you know, because I have it all. And was just sitting with what was the messaging that we could bring. So it wasn't just the literal physical trail, it was about the messaging too, right? So finding a balance and weaving the themes of this film with this beautiful landscape that we live with. So yeah, if I get a series, then we can definitely bring, that's what would be my main intention really, is to bring, yeah, I'll do a half an hour on Manitoba, you know, no problem. I loved Manitoba. And I understand the frustration of the people that live there, you know. But yeah, it was just already 2 hours people felt was too long. You know, we live in a time with attention spans much shorter than they used to be. So, we were lucky to slip it through. If they had it, you know, the buyers had it their way, would have been about 30 minutes shorter, right? So we got as much as we could fit in there. And there's, I don't remember, something like 1,875 different shots in that film. Like we got a lot in there. But yeah, it's a big country, and I would love nothing more than to feature every single province and territory in its own episode, you know?
Very neat. And the book, all the good things. And your next outdoor play adventure. I'm looking forward to it all.
All right. Well, thank you, Louise. Thank you, Mark.